Well, right there is fine. Good job. As you all are standing this morning, I invite you to find your way to the Gospel according to Mark. Our reading this morning is from the 4th chapter of Mark's Gospel, the 35th through the 41st verse. And I'll be reading from the Common English Bible. If your translation is a little different from mine, that is all right. Somewhere in between your translation of these ancient Greek words and mine, there is a word that God will speak to us together. A reading from Mark. Later that day, when evening came, Jesus said to them, "Let's cross over to the other side of the lake." They left the crowd and took him in the boat, just as he was. The other boats followed along. Gale force winds arose and waves crashed against the boat, so that the boat was swamped. But Jesus was in the rear of the boat, sleeping on a pillow. They woke him up and said, "Teacher, don't you care that we're drowning?" He got up, gave orders to the wind, and he said to the lake, "Silence, be still." The wind settled down, and there was a great calm. Jesus asked them, "Why are you frightened? Don't you have faith yet?" Overcome with awe, they said to each other, "Who then is this? Even the winds and the sea obey him." Friends, hear what the Spirit is saying to God's people. You may be seated. Let the words of my mouth and meditations of my heart be pleasing to you, Lord, my rock and my Redeemer. I thought it was important this morning to introduce first our Old Testament reading. How many of y'all remember that from way back 15 or so minutes ago when the children were up here? Which story was it? David and Goliath. That's right, the story of David's astounding act of faith. It's a fantastic story. It doesn't quite end where we finished the story with the children this morning, of course. And maybe you all are a little less familiar with the way the story actually ends because the tag of it never comes up in our lectionary text. And it's kind of ugly because David does actually finish off the giant. He doesn't just knock him out with a stone, but he takes Goliath's own sword and hacks his head off. Some of those Old Testament stories are a little bit gruesome. And that's just one of those details that today's reading overlooks. The reading focuses on David's act of faith, his trust in the power of the sovereign of Israel to deliver him and to deliver his people from this Palestinian threat. You know, it's not really about Israel versus Palestine, which is a huge conflict still today. It's sort of about David, but I think it's mostly, though, about God who is on the side of the weak and of the overpowered. The Lord is a safe place for the oppressed, a safe place in difficult times. You all remember reading those words this morning? Some of y'all don't. You just have to open your bulletins right there. And that's where I want to land today. I want to land in the Psalm. Some people advise us who take the pulpit never try to preach on a psalm. I think this is one that we can approach today, and I think it speaks something to us today, even in our various types of communities. And I think these are words that are going to sound rather different from one community to the next. Like when our troubles are, I don't know, no more difficult than choosing what to have for dinner and having to load another bin of laundry into the washer. Still, the Lord is a safe place for the oppressed, a safe place in difficult times. But in the war-torn villages of South Sudan, where one generation hasn't yet recovered from losing all of its young men to civil war before another civil war has begun, still, the Lord is a safe place for the oppressed, a safe place in difficult times. Or for our sisters and brothers who don't experience sexuality and gender in traditional binary ways and who face turmoil and persecution from every possible angle, the Lord is a safe place for the oppressed, a safe place in difficult times. Or for children who are incarcerated in wire cages and in tent cities or separated indefinitely from their parents, and for parents who can do nothing but pray for their children, pray for their safety, still, the Lord is a safe place for the oppressed, a safe place in difficult times. Does that sound a little different for each of those communities? Maybe the important thing is for us to be able to hear those words with the ears of a different community. Maybe the important thing is to put yourself in the worn shoes of a family fleeing gang violence in Central America, of a parent whose children will, without doubt, be forcefully or even be nurtured into gangs by the time that they're teenagers, maybe by the time they're Noah's age. Knowing that there simply isn't time to wait 10 or 15 years for documentation to be processed to make papers legal. The important thing, the immediate pressing thing, is to escape right now while there's a chance to risk whatever may come, because it has to be better than the future in store at home. For them, the psalm is a word of hope. It's a word from a community who's been through hardship and still clings to hope. Have mercy on me, Lord. Just look how I suffer because of those who hate me. Let the wicked go straight to the grave. The same for every nation that forgets God, because the poor won't be forgotten forever. The hope of those who suffer won't be lost for all time. But as much as that's a word of assurance and hope for people in impossible situations, it's a very different word for us who are so often and so largely complicit in our participation in their oppression. It's a calling to account. It's a reminder that God is on the side of persons who have no power or no voice of their own. We can either continue to be in the way of God's justice and mercy, which is definitely not an advisable or safe place to abide, or we can recognize that we have a responsibility for the poor, the widow, the orphan, the alien in our land. Get up, Lord. Don't let the people prevail. Let the nations be judged before you. Strike them with fear, Lord. Let the nations know they're only human. Get up, Lord. You know it's okay to talk to God like that? I think sometimes people teach us that it's not. You can't talk to God that way. It's okay to be frustrated. It's okay to be angry, to be filled with grief and fear, and to tell God all about it. God can handle our overwhelming emotions. For God, they're not overwhelming. They're well within God's power to take care of. And God is just waiting, just longing for us to bring all of our great big feelings to bear so that the one who shelters us like a mother hen can wrap us in a gigantic hug and whisper, "It's okay. Don't be afraid. I love you. I've got this." I mean, I don't think Jesus was scolding the disciples on that stormy, stormy night. When they called out to him like the psalmist does, "Get up! Get up, Lord! Don't you see that we're going to die?" I don't think Jesus was angry. I think once the storm had shut its trap, and by the way, that is literally how the Greek translates. There are two commands that Jesus gives the storm, and the second was, "Shut up!" Once the storm had shut its mouth and the sea was quiet again, I think Jesus looked with gentleness and with infinite love at those children around him, and with a gleam in his eye, hinted again at just who they were dealing with here. "Why are you afraid? Don't you trust me yet?" God knows that we're going to be afraid sometimes. Especially when people bear down on us and set up systems specifically designed to intimidate and to bring terror and to inspire hopelessness. God knows that we don't have the emotional wherewithal to bear that on our own. But God calls us to trust. No matter how dire the situation, no matter how desperate, God is reminding us that the one who spins stars into existence and shapes all the cosmic history is also powerfully and lovingly working for our personal good. God can handle this. It'll seem overwhelming for us, but it's not for God. God can handle this. The Lord is our safe place. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. As we join together in our closing hymn this morning, I want to invite you, if you need to spend some time in prayer, if you need to spend some time listening or screaming at God this morning, because God can handle it.